Hello everybody, welcome back. It's Mr. B. We're going to be talking today about cell theory and the organelles that exist inside of the building blocks of life, or cells. So, to begin, today we need to know what a cell is. And obviously a cell is the basic unit of structure and function of living things. All living things, for the most part, or that we know of as of today, are made of cells, these tiny individual structures that support life, and thus they're referred to as the building blocks of life. As you can see on the right side here, we have a microscopic view of some red blood cells, which obviously are inside of your bodies, help travel, or not travel, they help move oxygen from your lungs to basically everywhere in your body that needs it. So without those cells, or those particular kinds of cells, we wouldn't be able to survive here. Which leads us to the cell theory. Now basically your cell theory is going to comprise of three elements, and the reason why it's a theory about cells and not currently a law is because we're still finding organisms, brand new organisms that have never been discovered on a daily basis. So we can't necessarily prove this to be true 100% of the time, because we haven't found everything that's alive out there. So thus we begin with the cell theory. First part is the first part of the theory states that all living things are made out of cells. Part two is that cells are the basic unit of structure and function in living things. Simple enough, just your definition of cells. And finally, the cell theory, the third piece, states that all cells are produced from other cells. Basically, these cells cannot just spontaneously appear or appear out of nowhere. They have to come from other cells. So there's actually a process involved that will, take one cell and make two from it. And we'll be getting to that as we begin to progress through our cellular unit. Basically, in the world, there's two different types of cells. You're either going to have a prokaryotic cell or a eukaryotic cell. Now, to dive into each of them, generally, the prokaryotic versions do not have structures surrounded by membranes. They also have very few internal structures. And finally, an example of a prokaryotic cell would be that of the bacteria. Plus, one very important thing about prokaryotic cells is that they don't contain a nucleus of any sorts. So all of their genetic information just kind of floats around in here, as you might see in the structure right there. We obviously, humans, are not prokaryotic. We, on the other hand, are eukaryotic, which basically means we have a nucleus. And also, all of our organelles, or little tiny parts to cells, are surrounded by membranes, or they're enclosed by some sort of, I don't want to call it a capsule, but it has some sort of outer boundary to it. So, if you take a look at your animal and plant cells, though they look very different, they contain many of the same sorts of structures. And you'll be finding out more about this a little bit later on. So again, we are eukaryotic in nature. Our cells are eukaryotic. To look at your typical animal cell, here's just a artist rendering of it. You'll see there are many different parts to the cells, which are known as organelles. So here would be your plasma cell membrane. We have the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, your mitochondria, and all are different parts to the cells, and each one of those different parts or structures has its own function or job, which will be, one of the primary things that we're going to be looking at moving forward. Here you have your typical plant cell. looks very different than your animal cell, although it contains many of the same structures and functions that your animal cell had. So those specific organelles, again, I've been using the word a little bit. Basically, in essence, it means little or tiny organ. So they are the units that exist within inside the cell that have specific jobs. As you can see, all of the things that are highlighted here, from the mitochondria to the ribosome to the nucleus, they all are organelles, which is kind of your general name for all of those particular elements. They are found only inside eukaryotic cells. Also, all the stuff in between, everything you see in this diagram here, all the blue area would be referred to as the cytosol. And everything in a cell except for the nucleus is called the cytoplasm. So all of the different organelles in here would be referred to as the cytoplasm. However, the space that exists between them is the cytosol. That's kind of just FYI stuff for your information. You know, you're not necessarily going to be quizzed or tested or assessed on that particular stuff. First organelle I want to talk to you about is the cell membrane. It's the outer part of the cell. It surrounds your cell. It's the outer boundary. It is made of a double layer of lipids, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on. Very important job or function for the cell membrane is that it controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell. So it kind of acts like a bouncer in some respects. It's going to let certain things in, let certain things out, depending on what the cell needs. The cell wall, generally you're going to find these only in plant and bacterial cells. They surround some of the cells. This is a very, very rigid barrier that will help support the structure and protect it. It's also located outside of the cell membrane. So these different organisms that have cells which contain cell walls will also have a cell membrane as well. One key thing to look at here with respect to these cells is that they're rather rigid looking. Okay, they're kind of boxy, rather square cell structures. That's to help support a particular cell. Now, if you stop and think for a second, you may want to pause here when I'm done stating this. Why would a cell like a plant, for example, or an organism like a plant, want to have a rigid, supportive cell wall? Stop and think about it. All right, we're going to move on. Talk about a nucleus next. This is your control center. It's inside of the cell. This is going to literally be the boss of your cell, direct all of the activities, and in doing so, also contains the genetic information or the genetic material for the cell. That's basically your instruction manual. So the boss holds the instruction manual to tell everything else in the cell what to do. The mitochondrion, which here's kind of a picture of it, looks somewhat like a kidney bean, also is inside of your cell. This is what's going to be used to generate the energy through cellular respiration. It's enclosed in a double membrane, just like your nucleus and, in essence, your cell membrane. And also, kind of a unique feature of the mitochondrion is that it contains its own DNA. The only other structure to contain DNA in the cell is the nucleus, but your mitochondrion has its own. So, take-home message on the mitochondrion, it's where the power gets pumped out for the cell. It's where respiration occurs as well. Chloroplasts, generally we're only going to see these inside of plant cells. They contain green pigment known as chlorophyll, which is really good at absorbing sunlight. The reason why plant cells are going to need to absorb sunlight is because they need it for photosynthesis, which ironically takes place inside of the chloroplast. Inside the chloroplast, you also have these sacs that will you can kind of see them on here. They're layered. That will contain your chlorophyll and produce glucose, which is really food for the cell. Plants, again, they can't move. They can't go out and get their own food, so they will photosynthesize to produce it for them, being the autotrophs that they are, which means food-making organism. They're also bound by a double membrane as well, so something that will help enclose the chloroplast within itself. Those are the 5 organelles that I would like you to know here in this unit. You're going to be responsible for those 5 and those 5 alone, despite the fact that you may run into different organelles like lysosomes or ribosomes or the endoplasmic reticulum. The 5 that we just went through are the only 5 that you are going to be assessed on. So fear not and worry not about all of those other large and cumbersome words or vocabulary. So please, if you have any questions, now would be a time to jot them down, and please see me to ask them. Please also use some of the images in here to help you create your visual glossary. All right, that's Mr. B, signing out.